Welcome to O.I.K.O.S, an original Mars colony designed and presented by Zadok Gustavson, Lydia Holterman, Caleb Kilpatrick, Morgan Rudin, and Madison Woods for the University Honors Space Exploration class. The agenda for our presentation is Recruitment with the O.I.K.O.S program by Zadok, Life Support Systems with Caleb, Designing a Mars Habitat by Lydia, Cellular Agriculture by Madison, and finally, the O.I.K.O.S Interstellar Library, also known as OIL, by Morgan.
Initial colony recruitment. Our recruitment has to be as international as possible to get as many people from as many different countries, from as many different backgrounds as physically possible to maximize our engagement and the amount of people that are interested in our project. Our recruitment will focus on desired characteristics as specified within O.I.K.O.S. Initial recruitment focuses will be trying to get about 1,000 qualified individuals that meet their criteria set forward by O.I.K.O.S. The criteria and survey questions to determine what they actually meet for O.I.K.O.S. will be set in our report. Recruitment requires no prior engagement in space activities. You don't have to be an astronaut. You don't have to work for NASA to put yourself forward for recruitment, but they will play a factor in the candidate's recruitment or denial depending on their score on the O.I.K.O.S graph that we're going to put down. The O.I.K.O.S rating system, the patent is pending. The O.I.K.O.S measurement system is designed to apply a numerical measurement to each aspiring recruit in the hopes of impartially rating each individual. So for each characteristic, C, O, A, and L, there will be a numerical value assigned for each of those. To find that numerical rating, we're going to use a survey to try and get initial measurements of their O.I.K.O.S number. After that, we'll go through physical interviews, physical testing, making sure they actually match what they say on their survey, match what they actually say they can do. Each characteristic can reach a maximum number of 4, meaning your C value can be 4, your O value can be 4, your C value could also be 0 or 1. The numerical value of all characteristics is then multiplied to get a final number. This final number will be the candidate's final score. The higher number, the better. The highest final number possible being 256. 4 to the power of 4, 4 multiplied by 4, multiplied by 4, multiplied by 4. O.I.K.O.S, C is for character. Character is going to be defined by 4 concepts. Empathy, the ability to empathize with individuals on the colony and beyond. We're trying to make it so the colony is self-sufficient and doesn't have to rely on anyone else. Because of that, people are going to have to look out for each other. The colony's going to need to work. If one person's getting more than another person, that's going to cause some conflict. Second, we're going to look at criminality, prior convictions, and run-ins of the law. Failure on this section can result in an automatic 0 for this entire character section. If a person gets a 0 in one section, that is going to cause their score to be 0 itself. If their score is 0, they're not going to be able to be recruited because that's not within our acceptable parameters for a number. We'll set an acceptable parameter when we actually know what everyone's average is and try and get as above average as possible, maintaining our initial recruitment estimates of about 1,000. Commitment, so ability to stay on task and perform as expected, making sure they actually can do their job, making sure that they will do their job. Temperament, even temperament, making sure they're able to mediate situations, not resort to violence, not anything like that. Make sure that they're capable of being a person in a colony that doesn't really have much way of punishment. O.I.K.O.S, O is for obedience. Obedience will be defined by 3 concepts. Views on authority. These people need to respect authority. They need to follow authority. They're going to be taking orders from a company thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of miles away from them. And we need to make sure it runs smoothly. Otherwise, our company shareholders may not be too happy. We need to make sure the research runs smoothly. We need to make sure everything runs smoothly. And we have to have the authority of Earth to do that. Political action, we're going to weight it against those who participate or want political action. So if they participate in political action or are known for wanting political action, we're going to lower their obedience score by a significant amount in the hopes that they will not make it past recruiting targets. And if they do, well, there must be a very good candidate. Adherence, they need to be able to follow policy, and they need to have a tendency to follow policy. Without that, the colony will fall through. Cole, A is for adaptability. 4 primary characteristics for measuring adaptability. We're going to measure with response to change, the ability to respond to change well and to adapt to the situation. If they're unable to respond to change on a colony that may need to change at any given moment, it will cause bad situations to happen in the colony. They need to be able to respond to stress well. If a change were to occur that causes a great deal of stress, then they need to be able to adapt to it. Let's say ads start getting run within the hallways and there's constantly a blaring music in the hallways at all times. They need to be able to adapt to that, and they need to deal with that stress regardless of the situation. Company shareholders come first. Flexibility, they need to be able to rapidly adapt to situations and come up with solutions. Let's say an air filter is broke. They need to fix that as soon as possible. If there isn't a part to fix it, they need to find a way to fix it regardless. I'm sure they could come up with something. They're well funded. What else do we spend our money on? They need to be able to accept the situation at hand as well. They need to roll with it. They need to not push for change. Change is not something we want. If change were to occur, it must come from us, the company. Otherwise, the company falls apart. Cole, L is for liability. This section is specifically dedicated to the intake and performance of the body in space and on Mars. This colony is going to be rather limited in its ability to produce calories, right? We're going to need to be as calorically efficient as possible and bodily efficient as possible. With that in mind, we're going to have to factor in the total height of someone, their weight, their body size, and how many calories they're going to take in. Because they will be a liability on the colony. It's just how much of a liability they will be. We just need to measure that and make sure that it's acceptable and the colony will be able to run smoothly. We also need to study how the body responds to extended zero-G. There's still ongoing research on this. It's something that we know a great deal about, but not everything that we need to know. Bone density, gender, and height play a huge role in how well the body responds to extended gravity. Without their bone density can drop rapidly in zero-G. This can cause all sorts of issues. Mind you, this is all taken from a report about the study of gender and height and weight on caloric intake. They talk about how zero-G has a negative impact of bone density as well. Total size, this is actually something you don't really think about, but when in spaceship, space is actually very limited, and if they're going to be on the spaceship for a year or so, how big they are is going to massively impact how many people we can have on board. So we need to factor in their weight, we need to factor in their body mass, and the total space occupied on the spaceship, knowing that a person of lesser size and a person that takes in less calories is going to take up less space on a spaceship, and they're not going to take up as much physical space on the spaceship, but they're also not going to take as much storage space on the spaceship, right? We're not going to need as many calories stored to get to the place that we need to get, which is Mars.
This is Caleb Kilpatrick, and I will be going over the life support systems for the O.I.K.O.S Mars base colony. Overview. To solve the problem of making a colony on Mars habitable for humans over a long period of time, I have found the most important resources that will need to be acquired, recycled, or regulated. These include water, breathable air, temperature, waste, and energy. There will need to be systems in place for each resource, as well as some software to keep all these systems at the correct level or to adjust them as needed. One important resource is water. A solution for how to recycle water is to use the water recovery system, which was created by NASA for the ISS. NASA's system works by reclaiming wastewater, water from humidity, and water from the suits of the crew. It then processes urine before combining it with the rest of the reclaimed water which is then put through additional water processors. This process is repeated until all the water is clean. This process currently recovers and recycles 90% of the water used, so there is room for improvement. The clean water will then be stored in large storage tanks. All of this would need to be upscaled to support a colony of our size. I believe that would be possible. On the right is the picture of a European Space Agency astronaut named Frank D. Wynne holding part of the water recovery system. Air is another resource that will need to be maintained, and this can be done by implementing a version of the air revitalization system and the oxygen generation system created by NASA for the ISS. The air revitalization system is a system that was created by NASA, which cleans the air by using a charcoal bed, a lithium hydroxide bed, and a catalytic oxidizer. The molecular sieves will be used to remove carbon dioxide, which could be assisted by any forms of plant life in the colony. The oxygen generation system is another system created by NASA, which generates oxygen by breaking down water into oxygen and hydrogen. The oxygen would then be released to the colony, and the hydrogen could be used for other purposes if needed. Oxygen could also be reduced from the large amount of CO2 in Mars' atmosphere. This is an idea I had that could be assisted by the MOXIE system that I'll be going over later in the slides. A lack of nitrogen may become a problem for the colony, but this could be addressed by breaking down nitric oxide found on Mars through heating. There is another resource that will need to be regulated. Our system for temperature regulation in space could be modeled after the temperature and humidity systems used aboard the ISS. This system provides airborne heat removal, air temperature control, humidity removal, and airborne particle/bacteria removal. This system would most likely need to be adjusted for the temperature on Mars and the size of our colony. There would also need to be some form of insulation to keep the heat from escaping into the atmosphere. Waste in the colony will need to be disposed of or recycled. This can be done in a couple of different ways. Any waste that can be recycled should be, so it can be used for other purposes in the colony. Anything that can't be recycled could be dealt with by either jettisoning it from the colony, which would create future problems like litter. But another solution that was suggested by NASA is called trash to gas, which would use thermal degradation to produce gas from unwanted waste. This leaves behind some ash, but this would be much easier to deal with than the actual waste itself. Energy could be produced on Mars through a couple of different ways. Wind turbines and solar power could produce some power for the colony, but if this does not produce enough energy, we could also use another solution. This was suggested by the ESA, and that could be added on to the wind and solar energy. It's using CO2 fuel cells. Carbon monoxide and oxygen could be produced through reduction of the atmosphere, which is mostly CO2. They could then possibly be used in CO2 fuel cells. On to what I covered in the energy slide. This is the MOXIE device. The device was on board the Perseverance rover, and it was able to split carbon dioxide to produce oxygen. Using a device similar to this, we could be able to create the CO2 fuel energy cells. This would also be able to create any extra oxygen if we needed it to pump into the air. The AI will be an important part in making sure that we keep all of the life support systems in check. The AI will make sure that all systems are working correctly and will alert someone if something malfunctions. The AI will need to find stable settings for each system and adjust when necessary to keep every resource in a stable range. The type of AI that I believe would work best to manage these systems would be a reactive AI that would take in information regarding the optimal settings for each system and then keep it there. But I also believe that we would need to modify this AI to have it work well for our systems. The AI would also take in information that would allow it to correctly supply everyone's food and water if it needed to be monitored. I don't believe these resources would need to be rationed unless the colony was running low on supplies. And in the case that the AI malfunctions or it goes rogue in some way, we could implement fail-safes like allowing someone to take control of the systems if needed. So AI will be extremely important in all the other software as well, so we will need to keep it protected. The software will need to be protected from everyone but those with admin permissions, both while they are on Earth and on Mars. To do this, we will need to protect AI and other software that is used in these systems using cybersecurity. Due to how important this code is for the survivability of the colony, it would need to be highly guarded and access would only be available to trusted personnel. We would also need to guard against any cyber attacks that may possibly happen. I will now review this current section. These systems will work well to maintain, recycle, or generate the necessary resources for a colony on Mars. These essentials include water, air, temperature, waste, and energy. With these systems in place, it will be important to monitor and regulate them through AI. With such an important software in the colony, it will be imperative that we guard it using cybersecurity. Support system for the ISS was around $1 billion for development and another billion to launch. With the added systems and increased number of people, I believe this price would be at least tripled, reaching around $6 billion in total. An estimate for how much setting up a working AI would cost is around $190,000. And it is recommended to spend 5.6% to 20% of your total IT budget on cybersecurity. This amount may need to be higher due to how important the software will be. NASA and the government would both be highly interested in funding this project. I think NASA would help because they have worked on similar projects and they would be interested in building a colony on Mars. And I believe the government would be willing to help fund the project because it would be instrumental in starting a colony on Mars, which would look good for the country and possibly give them more access to resources on Mars.
This is Designing a Mars Habitat by Lydia Holterman. When building a Mars habitat, there's a lot that we must consider when starting. We need a practical design that meets the needs of the colonists, storage opportunities for mission supplies and living materials. There needs to be proper building materials for the habitat and for it to be structurally sound. We need to consider safety considerations for the people living there, as some of which was covered by Caleb. And there need to be healthy living conditions for the settlers, some of which has also been covered by Caleb, but also looking into how do we make colonists feel comfortable in space. A long-term habitat on Mars requires a lot of care to minimize the effects of radiation, such as thick shielding for the structure. These types of habitats are too large, heavy, and expensive to be sent to Mars, so it's better to construct them out of native materials. The most promising idea today is 3D printing a habitat on Mars using the local regolith, meaning the rocks and soil of Mars. This solves the problem of transporting materials to Mars. Scientists are still testing what materials they would use for the best construction material and for the safest radiation prevention system. The company AI Space Factory won a section of NASA's 3D printed habitat challenge with their design, Marcia. Their plan material is made by mixing crushed Martian regolith with a plastic-like polymer, possibly using a renewable bioplastic called polylactic acid. The company claims that the mixture is 2 to 3 times stronger than concrete and 5 times more durable than concrete in continual cycles of freezing and thawing. It would also be relatively radiation resistant, and that is a direct quote from their company. Their plan is to send machines to Mars first, and then the machines will harvest material and build the habitat before humans arrive. For my design, I'd like to build something that is somewhere between an apartment-style building and a college dorm. It would feature suite-style rooms, which is 2 rooms connected through a shared bathroom. It would have central community space areas. It needs a balance of shared living areas for a sense of community and larger gatherings, while also having a private space for the settlers. It would have a kitchen and dining area, which includes dining spaces for the residents, and then also separate areas for food preparation. And finally, it would have storage sections for the supplies needed for maintenance of human habitation and the maintenance of the structure itself. This is my basic rendering of the living area, the floor plan. This layout would have suite-style rooms on each side of the building with a communal space in the hallway. So these are the rooms I'm talking about. Each square represents a suite. So this square is 2 rooms with a shared bathroom. This is another 2 rooms and another 2 rooms and so on. And this is another row of rooms for the settlers. This space in the middle is the communal living space for people to gather and have community gatherings. There would be multiple floors of this layout, or floors built to serve other purposes such as entertainment or storage as necessary. With our program accepting 100 travelers for the colony, we would need 50 rooms, so about 4 floors of this layout. Here are some rendering examples of what habitation on Mars could look like, specifically the interior of these buildings. This picture and this picture are renderings of 3D printed spaces. This one specifically is by AI Space Factory's Marcia program. You can see these faint horizontal lines, and that is from the 3D printing structure of the building. This image down here is an idea of how a living space, a private living space on Mars could look. This would not be 100% accurate to our design. It would have a different shape, a different structure, but it is still an example of how to make a living space feel home-like and comfortable for the settlers. Another concern is kitchen and dining, and I took much of this information from current United States regulations for restaurants. I've chosen to give 1,200 square feet for the 100 people in the dining area that we would need to fit in, with another 800 square feet for the kitchen, split between 400 square feet for food preparation, a basic kitchen area, and another 400 square feet for the O.I.K.O.S cellular agriculture system, as will be later explained by Madison. This is a rendering of what the bioreactor for the cellular agriculture system might look like, but again, that is something that Madison will discuss on her own. This is what the dining area could look like. It is a very basic design that could fit all of the 100 settlers in at once and give them freedom to choose where and how they would like to dine. A Martian habitat also needs to serve the needs of the people living there. This includes creating a semblance of life on Earth. To do so, that would include a light cycle, having private and community spaces for the settlers, and also giving them a connection to nature. Having windows in a Mars habitat is currently not feasible due to radiation concerns. So something that I would like to incorporate into my design is faux LED skylights. These are 2 picture examples, and my plan is to recreate the daily light cycle we are used to seeing on Earth through these fake windows. It's very hard for people to be locked up inside of a space for years without being able to see the outside world, see natural light. And while this is not a perfect solution, it is a very good step to creating healthy spaces for the settlers to live in that can make them feel reminiscent of Earth. Another thing I would like to incorporate is plant life in the enclosure, in the habitat. Plants have been shown to be able to grow in Martian regolith. This picture here was recently published by the Smithsonian in their article. The Mars regolith has much more iron than ours does on Earth, but it is still possible for plants to grow there. And when I say growing plants, I'm not necessarily talking about growing food for us to eat, but just growing plants that can be kept inside in a greenhouse setting, shown by this rendering, or inside our own habitat for the Mars colonists to be able to see and give them a connection to nature. Possible funding and costs I would like to consider is a partnership with the AI Space Factory Martia project in building this livable habitat, especially because they are a company that won NASA's 3D printing contest, and their technology is extremely useful in building the space I would like to see on Mars. In traveling to Mars, it is currently estimated at about $230 billion for the first mission they have planned to Mars in 2035. And with the amount of things we would need to send to Mars for this project, it would be much more than $230 billion.
Hello, my name is Madison Woods, and I am the zoology specialist for Team O.I.K.O.S. Today I will be discussing the O.I.K.O.S cellular agriculture system, O.I.K.O.S, a revolutionary technology that will bring high-quality cultured meat to the residents of our Mars colony. In this presentation, I will give you an overview of O.I.K.O.S and the science of cellular agriculture. I will start with a brief history and background on cellular agriculture and cell-based meat in space. Next, I will detail the design and process of O.I.K.O.S. Then I will debut the brand new O.I.K.O.S space menu, complete with nutritious food sourced from O.I.K.O.S's greenhouse, O.I.K.O.S and insect farm. I will then explore potential costs and avenues for funding. Finally, I will discuss the potential challenges and future of food in space. Lab-grown meat has long captured people's interest as a potential source of sustainable protein. Raising animals for meat requires a great amount of water, food, and space. Cellular agriculture, also known as bioculture, provides a promising alternative to the costly process of raising animals for meat. Through this process, just 0.5 grams of cow muscle can produce enough beef to make 80,000 burgers. With this technology, it would be possible for astronauts to obtain meat without bringing animals to space. Raising animals on Mars would be impractical due to the low energy efficiency of meat. For example, for every 100 kcals you feed a cow, you only get 2 kcals of beef back. In space, every calorie counts. To transport just 1 pound of food to the ISS, it costs roughly $9,000 to $18,000. For this reason, many companies are investing in alternative forms of food production, such as bioculture. One of these companies is Aleph Farms, who successfully grew the first cell-based beef in space on the ISS in 2019. Why cellular agriculture? Most supplies in space have a shelf life of 2 years. Given that Mars is a 9-month trip away from Earth, astronauts will need a means of producing their own foods if they plan to stay and colonize the planet. Conventional animal farming would be impossible and impractical on Mars. Cellular agriculture requires less space, water, and resources than raising animals for meat. Additionally, raising animals on Mars would come with challenges such as disease, waste production, and radiation. Cellular-based meat can provide space travelers with the comfort of familiarity and positive mental health effects. Food is a large component of culture, and cell-based meat will be a staple in the space exploration cuisine. The O.I.K.O.S cellular agriculture system will consist of a deep freezer which will hold and preserve the animal cells. The main component of the system will be a bioreactor, where the cells will be fed a medium to help them grow and multiply. The bioreactor will also house biocompatible scaffolding, which will help the cells differentiate into fat and muscle cells. This system will take up little space within the colony. It should be noted that bioreactors currently being used for cell culturing will likely have to be adapted for the high radiation, low gravity environment on Mars. The process will begin here on Earth with the harvesting of cells from a live animal. The cells will then be frozen through a process called cryopreservation and flown to the O.I.K.O.S colony. Once the cells arrive at O.I.K.O.S, they will be transferred to the O.I.K.O.S bioreactor, where they will be fed a medium of amino acids, glucose, vitamins, inorganic salts, growth factors, and other proteins. After this, cells are grown on scaffolding to help them differentiate into fat and muscle cells. In just 5 to 7 weeks, the process will be complete and the meat will be ready to be cooked and consumed. The image on the left is Mark Post holding the world's first cellular-based burger, which he produced in 2013. Now I would like to present the official O.I.K.O.S space menu. This menu details theoretical food selections for the residents of O.I.K.O.S. Selections include bio-bacon and insect crackers, cell chicken and potato pancakes, a biotastic burger, and a Martian loaded baked potato. Residents will be served fresh produce from the O.I.K.O.S greenhouse and state-of-the-art cellular cultured meat straight from the O.K.O.S facility. Currently, the production of cellular-based meats is costly. The first cell-cultured hamburger cost $325,000 to produce. Today, cell-cultured meats cost about $17 a pound. The greatest costs are associated with sourcing amino acids and other components of the growth medium. Estimations place the cost of equipment for a large-scale cell-based meat facility at $60 billion. O.K.O.S would cost millions to build, operate, and maintain. The transportation of equipment to Mars is estimated to cost $130 per kilogram. The average weight of a bioreactor is 520 kilograms, meaning transportation of the reactor alone would be around $67,600. Construction of a bioreactor on Earth costs around $30,000. Additionally, the ingredients needed for the process, such as animal cells, cell medium, and scaffolding, can be expensive. A liter of medium costs around $19.7 to produce. The cost of maintaining a system would vary depending on the potential issues and accidents and frequency of use. Luckily, many companies are interested in investing in cell-based meat. In 2021, cultivated meat companies raised more than $1.3 billion in funding. Funding may be available through bioculture companies such as Aleph Farms, Mosa Meats, Upside Foods, and Believer Meats. These companies are supported by larger ones such as Tyson and Cargill. Funding could also come from public and private space agencies. The European Space Agency, NASA, Japan's Space Agency, and Canada's Space Agency have all invested in cultured meat. With cellular agriculture having practical applications in space, as well as here on Earth, it will likely be easy to find funding. The largest challenges for O.K.O.S are producing the medium, potential equipment malfunction, and adapting the systems to work in the conditions on the surface of Mars. It will need to be determined if the medium can be produced on Mars, or if the medium will have to be transported to O.I.K.O.S from Earth. Given the amount of medium necessary, if it cannot be produced on Mars, cell-based meats may not be a sustainable food source for space colonies. Additionally, there are no repair techs or part deliveries on Mars. The inhabitants of O.I.K.O.S colony will need to be extremely familiar with the system and how to repair it in case of malfunctions. Lastly, more experimentation is needed to determine the effects of microgravity and high radiation exposure on cell-cultured meat and its creation process. O.K.O.S will need to be regularly cleaned, upgraded, and repaired. In the future, O.K.O.S and systems like it may be able to produce all types of plant and animal foods. Future space travelers may be able to enjoy cell-cultured shrimp Alfredo or pepperoni pizza. Advances in cellular agriculture could also help lessen climate change by eliminating the need to raise animals for protein. Cell-based meat may become the standard someday. In the future, our ancestors may find it odd that we ever raised animals for meat at all.
Hello, my name is Morgan Rudin, and this section will be about the O.I.K.O.S Interstellar Library and Data Transfer Center. Here are just some of the ways that it will be integrated into the colony. OIL will be an interplanetary archive facility for Earth and Mars, both public and private ventures, as well as communication facilitation between the Earth and Mars colony. The library system will use a cloud to transmit books, films, instructions, letters from home, from the initial reception to a centralized computer lab or even future personal devices. This lab and the library system as a whole will be connected to other Martian colonies, which are centered around the sporadic placement of photoreceivers. And what I mean by photoreceivers is that the primary technology used to transfer the data from Earth to Mars and vice versa will be the usage of optical space lasers. This is a quote from NASA in their recent development of this new technology. Quote, "It would take roughly 9 weeks to transmit a complete map of Mars to Earth with current radio frequency systems. With lasers, it would take about 9 days," end quote. Lasers are the future of data communication compared to radio waves for many of its pros listed. It has tight infrared waveforms, which means more data at once, narrower beams that minimize interference, 40 times higher bandwidth, 50% less mass, 25% less power consumption, and relatively low cost and semi-mobile ground sites. This is all information taken from NASA. One con is that it needs to be exactly in line with the receiver, one into the other, one receptor to another, without any kind of atmospheric interference. This can be anything from clouds to asteroids, etc. We will address this issue in the coming time, but this is new technology that is still on the cutting edge of being developed. It was recently debuted in 2021, and it will be the epicenter technology regarding space communications in the future. So this is an O.I.K.O.S original hypothetical Earth to Mars map utilizing this optical telecommunication system. We start off on the left, which is a picture of an actual photoreceiver and transmitter that NASA is developing with this technology, and it would be sent directly to one of the receivers on Mars. The placement on Mars is very crucial because it needs to be on the northern hemisphere of the planet, which is considerably more flat and more arid. Therefore, it's less prone to dust storms and has more fibrous clouds, which means that it can easily minimize interference and allow the photoreceptors to send in more effectively. But it still has to be relatively close to the equator because any farther up north would make the temperatures too low and inhospitable for humans and the technology. And the crude diagram on the right would be the photoreceiver on top that is somehow physically or wirelessly tethered to an underground bunker, which should be about 1 to 1.6 meters underground to protect it from solar radiation. As I said before, the receivers, which would be above ground, would be semi-mobile perhaps, which means that it could possibly be moved remotely from the Martian colony or on Earth at a certain radius of, let's say, 100 meters or so around, in order to best maintain geosynchronicity between the Earth receiver and the Martian receiver. As said before, the above-ground photoreceptors will capture the initial data and send it to an underground station or bunker, which will be humidity and temperature controlled and far enough down underground so that little solar radiation will damage it. It will also need to be under constant rust monitoring. Perhaps some thin oxygen in the room in the same way that rare books are kept in thin oxygen to prevent decomposition. The best material for this bunker would be layers of aluminum shields and semiconductors. Aluminum especially because not only is it cheap and easy to transfer and replace, it also does not very easily rust. Aluminum oxide merely corrodes very slowly and can be replaced with proper maintenance and maintained. The actual storage will consist of files on SSD or solid-state drives. This is best for files that are constantly coming in and out, such as certain instructions, documents, files, etc., whereas HDD, which stands for hard disk drives, are more for long-term, larger file storage, such as anything with audio or video or things that generally just need to be kept and not accessed for a very long time. Space Communications and Navigation, which is a NASA subsidiary, is developing beacons near the receivers on which spacecraft can log onto. This is going back to the con of the difficulty in geosynchronicity when it comes to optical lasers. Like I said before, the photoreceptors will be semi-mobile and able to move within a certain radius, and I would like the stations to be spaced out like on Earth. The DSN as we know it today is set out so that Earth is always facing Voyager 1 in some aspect, either in California, in Sydney, or in Spain. The stations on Mars should be placed out quite similarly and will act not only as a perfect geosynchronous lock with Earth, but also as general colonial epicenters for future colonies on Mars. While it is difficult to come up with an accurate figure for this technology at the moment, we do have something very close. NASA's current Martian laser telecommunications testing and demonstration in the past couple of years estimated the technology going at around $90 million, with that figure exponentially decreasing over time as the technology becomes more and more refined. A possible source of funding and even partnership is the private company of Lone Star Lunar, which managed to put a lander on Mars that acts as an offloading offshore site for private companies to send their data to for holding. This would be a very good team up. However, they are very private and hush on their current projects, but I am sure they would be very willing to jump on this particular investment, and they are funded by this following list of major space-centered venture capitalist firms, which I'm sure will also be a great resource for funding this project. Although O.I.K.O.S does have a preference for public and international usage, such as NASA collaborating with other space agencies, as is the general rule for any kind of library system. There is also the possibility of running ads before accessing certain technologies on the colonies. We are very used to this already in our current technological state, and to bring this technology and bring these advertising spaces to media in the colonies would, if anything, make it feel more like home. Thank you.